A very warm good afternoon and good morning to all present here. I am Anusha Kaul, a junior advisor to the Commercial Counselor at Advantage Austria, New Delhi. Welcome you all to the webinar on Automotive in India, ICE, EV, and hydrogen. I would like to now invite our Trade Commissioner, Mr. Hotnagar, to open the webinar.
Ja, thank you, Anusha. So, schönen guten Vormittag nach Österreich. Ich freue mich, dass Sie an diesem Webinar Automotive in Indien teilnehmen. Und zwar deshalb, weil das ein äußerst spannender Markt ist, vor allem für österreichische Unternehmen und sehr viele Möglichkeiten und Chancen bietet. Mein Name ist Hans-Jörg Hörtnagel. Ich bin seit 3,5 Jahren Wirtschaftsdelegierter in New Delhi. Und vielleicht zu Beginn noch ein paar allgemeine Angaben zur indischen Wirtschaft. Die indische Wirtschaft ist derzeit die 5. größte Volkswirtschaft der Welt und wird bis Ende dieses Jahrzehnts zur drittgrößten Volkswirtschaft aufsteigen. Im jetzt Ende März ablaufenden Wirtschaftsjahr wird Indien um 6,3% wachsen. Das ist getragen in erster Linie von einem starken Inlandskonsum. Das heißt, die indische Mittelschicht wächst laufend und verfügt auch über ein höheres Einkommen. Der zweite wichtige Punkt ist starke Investitionen der Regierung, vor allem in die Infrastruktur. Zum Beispiel werden jeden Tag 28 Kilometer an Autobahnen gebaut. Im neuen Budget, das ab 1. April dieses Jahres startet, sind 130 Milliarden Dollar für den weiteren Ausbau der Infrastruktur vorgeschrieben. Und das schafft natürlich enormes Potenzial. Der indische Automobilsektor ist einer der wichtigsten Sektoren der indischen Industrie, macht ca. 6% des indischen Bruttoinlandsproduktes aus. Es ist die 5. größte Automobilindustrie in der Welt und allein im Jahr 2023/24 wurden 4,5 Millionen Kraftfahrzeuge exportiert, davon 800.000 PKWs, 3,5 Millionen einspurige Kraftfahrzeuge. Das heißt, ein enormes Potenzial auch für österreichische Unternehmen. Wir haben derzeit ca. 10 Unternehmen, die in diesem Bereich tätig sind und auch immer mehr Ansiedelungen, immer mehr österreichische Unternehmen, die in Indien produzieren. Damit beende ich. Now I hand back to Anusha for the webinar.
Thank you, sir. Before we begin with the presentations for the webinar, there are some housekeeping rules that I would like to mention for all the participants and the speakers. Please keep your cameras and microphones turned off. Only the active speaker should have the camera and the microphone turned on. Also, please do not record or screenshot the presentations. We will be providing with the recording of the presentation post the webinar is completed. And also, we have a designated Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We request all of you to put your questions in the chat section of the webinar. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Anil Uni, who's the CEO and Deputy Executive Director, Business Development and Strategy from Automotive Component Manufacturers Association of India. Mr. Uni will be addressing us on the topic, Role and Contribution of the Automotive Components Industry in the Transition. Sir, please begin with the presentation.
Thank you, Anusha. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Mr. Hotnagel. And good morning to everyone back in Austria, and good afternoon to people who joined us in India. Thank you for inviting ACMA to present an overview of the Indian auto component industry at the webinar today. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So it's just a quick one-slide introduction to ACMA and information on how we serve the Indian auto component industry. ACMA was formed way back in 1959. We are a young, vibrant, and a dynamic industry body, evolving along with the industry. And ACMA's services are rendered through these 5 pillars that we are talking about. Business development, which facilitates various platforms and linkages to members to connect and integrate with the OEMs and its value chain. The second pillar, through the second pillar, we actively engage with the government on regulations, policies, etc., to ensure a level playing and a healthy environment, conducive environment conducive competitive environment for the automotive industry and its value chain. Through the education, skilling, and mentoring, which is encompassed under the technology and industry competitiveness. We facilitate the skills to improve the processes of the company and other areas to align with the industry's demands. Through the strategic partnerships, pillar, we look at supporting inorganic growth through joint ventures, mergers, acquisitions, technical alliances, and of course, we also very closely work with the startup community, the startup ecosystem in India, and of course, we are open and we have been working with startup ecosystem globally as well. And the fifth pillar is basically to sensitize the various stakeholders through the media and on the industry and its brand promotion. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a quick snapshot on the auto components industry. The Indian auto component industry clocked about $74.1 billion in the last financial year. So financial year in India is from April to March. So the last financial year we did about $74.1 billion worth of components, and it's slated to further grow this year as well. Next. Yeah. So India, traditionally we were a net importer, but for the past 2 years, you see, we have been closing the gap, and this year, in fact, we have done over $300 million over imports. So we are a trade surplus from this year. Again, while in the next, we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So if you see the slide, the category and the revenue from where we come from. So most of our production, if you see, is focused on the engine, body chassis, and suspension and drive transmission. It encompasses almost 70% of the production. And the rest of the electricals and electronics pie has also grown over the past few years, recent past. And the other on the other side, if you see the right side, you see the component supply. Our major supplies go to the passenger vehicle segment, followed by the commercial vehicle. So if you put together the MNHCV and LCVs, we do about 25%. Our supplies goes about 25% to this particular segment. And of course, then comes the two-wheelers, which is two-wheelers and three-wheelers, which is very much focused in South Asia primarily. And of course, the tractors and construction equipment. So within the PV, I think the pie may grow a bit if you take separately the electric vehicle also. I mean, overall, if you see the supply segment to the electric mobility is also there. That I'll showcase in the next slide. The next one, please. Thank you. So exports, as if you see, you can notice that we do about $21 billion of exports. And you would notice that over 60% of what we export goes to the US. And if you further drill down on what is our export, which categories of where we export to. So about 80% of what we export goes to the OEM or tier 1 companies, and the rest 20% goes to the aftermarket segment. So of course, our exports at the moment are primarily driven for the ICE vehicle parts, but we are developing more on the electric mobility as well. Next, please. So, yeah, that's fine. Imports again, primarily, we are seeing, if you see Asia, that also China is our major destination from where we import. China, South Korea, Japan, EU, and the US. And these many of these are proprietary parts as well, which the OEMs get the import. The next slide is basically just an analysis of how we've been growing on the exports and reduction in imports. The next slide, please. Yeah. So if you see in North America, we've grown, over the last year by 4% and to Europe by 12%. And similarly, if you see the imports also grew by 3% and 4% from Asia and Europe percent, but rest of the places either we have been stagnant or degrown there. Next, please. You see, these are the primarily the export segmentation by product type, and so again, engine components. If you see engine, transmission, drive transmission components, almost about 50% plus we do that, and then followed by suspension and body chassis parts. Again, as I was mentioning, electricals and electronics pie has grown, and that's in the recent past. Next. So again, this is on the imports of how we and what we import. Again, as I mentioned, this is primarily these are some of the proprietary components. But again, in the engine component and drive transmission is where most of our imports are. The electricals and electronics as well is there, very much there. And since more electrification is going to be there, localization is what we are focusing more on. Next, please. Yeah. So this is, in a nutshell, if you see over the past 10 years, we've grown over 2.5x over the last, 10 years, if you see. And so the industry's turnover now stands at 74.1 billion, and this is an Indian rupees. Pardon, I will change this. And we expect that this would again grow by about another 10% this year. The next, please. This again, we thought we should be there in showcasing our imports as well. So exports, if you see, primarily more to the US and EU per se. And if you see imports in China being number one, and then followed by Germany, South Korea, Japan, US, etc. Next, please. The Indian aftermarket is also very vibrant. We have a good $11.3 billion worth of aftermarket, and it's it's increasing as the vehicle usage for commercial purposes and personal vehicles are also are growing. The growth in rural demand is also is pushing up the aftermarket serviceability that has gone up as well. Yep. Please. Yeah. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that the association is also evolving as the industry evolves, and thus we got into sensitization and promoting the idea of alternate mobility solutions, potential opportunities for the automotive value chain players, because there was an apprehension if the new mobility or electric mobility space, when that comes in, what will happen to the traditional auto component manufacturer. So, the industry, to allay the fears, has been doing studies and sensitizing its members as to where the opportunity lies for the component manufacturers in these spaces. The government of India is also very keen to curb its spend on hydrocarbons, and thus is looking at electric mobility, biofuels and ethanol, hydrogen. So if you talk about hydrogen, I think initially it will be more for the commercial vehicle or the bus segments that to begin with. But later on, as the technology matures, it will further percolate down to the other mobility segments. So if you see in India, we now have a CNG driven motorbike as well. Now that's available. Policies are being derived by the government in consultation with all stakeholders to see how to leverage these technologies for larger good of the environment, the country, industry, and all the other stakeholders. The next slide, please. So, as I was mentioning, There's a lot of work that industry is working on. There's a lot of efforts being put by the industry on R&D. The startup engagement, which I was talking about, that's also propelling, inorganic growth. And as the time to market reduces, these avenues of inorganic growth have also propelled the industry to grow further, faster, and respond to global demands. Next, please. And this is just a quick snapshot on the EV landscape in India. So as I mentioned, this is for the financial year 24. That is from and that ended in April 24. And clearly, you will see the growth is driven both in the electric, in the two-wheelers and three-wheeler electric mobility segment. And we expect in the next few years, by 2030, almost 100%, close to 100% would go electric. Especially the last mile delivery in the e-commerce segment. I think almost everyone is going 100% electric in the very near future. While the numbers that you see on the screen are small, but the adoption in the passenger vehicles and bus segments are also growing. In fact, the government of India is very aggressively looking at putting on the roads over 50,000 electric buses by 2030, which would be a huge push of adoption of greener mobility solutions for general public. Yeah, next one, please. So just to summarize, the auto component industry, supplies. If you see, we do about 62. Just look at the table in the lower half in $1 billion. What we have given. The component supply to OEMs is about $62.4 billion, which grew about 5.3% last year. Aftermarket also grew by 6.7%, $11.3 billion. Our exports were $21.2 billion as against $20.1 billion. And our imports also have, I think there's some error here, but nevertheless, I think we've grown, but it's overall, if you see, exports has surpassed imports. So at $74.9 billion, our growth rate was about 6.3 over last year. Next. So this is what goes for the industry, and there are, of course, some challenges as well. Challenges being the geopolitical changes, the environmental changes, but then that also provides us opportunity. Freight costs, the GST, which is equal to VAT, what we have. The rates on auto components are on the higher side, which we are, working with the government to see how we can reduce it and bring it par across the board. However, what goes for the industry is the GDP growth. The demand for vehicle is continues to hold. There's a lot of work that the government is doing in the space of infrastructure development, and of course the international demand also has been stable. The recent past, it's too early to probably comment on it, but we feel it might have not a huge impact, but yes, it will definitely impact us. We're still in the process of assessing as to how it will. With the focus on clean and new technologies, I think India is looking at joining the bandwagon now itself. We want to be the leaders or go on with time globally. That's where we are working towards. Carbon neutrality. Again, as I said, is a challenge, but it's also a great opportunity, because we are trying to address it across the value chain. And of course, the new entrants in mobility space also provides opportunities for many more players across the levels to be part of this mobility sphere. Next, so to address all these, next slide, please. Yeah, so to address the greater mobility segment or sphere, ACMA has floated the ACMA Mobility Foundation, because ACMA per se is only was only addressing the auto component the automobile OEM segment only. But here with this, we expand our services to the entire mobility ecosystem. So that's from me. Thank you very much. So I'll take the questions later on, as you mentioned.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving such a detailed overview of the sector in India. I now invite Mr. Sharad Sri Kumar, who is the Managing Director at HEN Indo-Pacific Private Limited. He'll be addressing on how HEN has successfully established and grown its presence in the Indian automotive sector. Sir, please begin with the presentation.
Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Mr. Hornagal, and thank you, the entire team at Advantage Austria, for giving us the opportunity and giving me the opportunity to present the case of HEN. So the idea is not to give you what's happening in India. I think Anil has most comprehensively given you what's happening in India in terms of automotive component industry. But the idea here is we want to present HEN as a case of how in a quick turnaround time, HEN was able to bring in a strategy to set up something in India, and we are in a pretty short time. We are already in the growth track. So for the people who are my friends in Austria who are already thinking about setting up something in India, we are just wanting to give you some motivation and also to give you an idea how Indian industrial landscape is growing and how the ease of business is improving. So that's the idea here. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to quickly introduce HEN for people who don't know what HEN it is. So next slide, please. So HEN is automotive group based out of Austria. So we are part of the HEN Connector group, where we have two divisions, HEN Connector division and Engineered. So HEN Connectors, we have two companies, HEN Connector per se, which is based out of Dornbirn, Vorarlberg in Austria. And then we also have Eisley based out of Germany. We also have the other division called Engineered, where they have capability to produce multiple components, automotive, non-automotive. They are spread across Austria, Germany, China, as well as now in North America. So overall, as a group, we are a small company. We are a 200 million euro group. It is today owned by Mr. Martin Oneberg, but compared to where we were 10 years back, I think we are in a pretty fast growth rate to an extent of 8 to 10x. Next, please. So that's the global footprint of HEN as a group. So we are present across the entire globe. As a production facility, we are mostly focused on Austria and Germany. We have now a site in China, the new one in India, and we are also coming up with new facilities in Mexico as well. Next slide, please. So this is how we have progressed. We have been in the automotive components market for more than 30 years now. We had a unique product for the automotive industry, especially for the four-wheeler industry, which used to be called as connectors. We were replacing the traditional clamps. From there, today we are now into various components, just not metal, but plastics. We are also selling machines. So we traditionally used to be only in the European cars, OEMs, but now today we are spread across Asia, North America, across product ranges, four-wheeler and different segments. Next, please. So this is the overall product portfolio. So across, we predominantly focus on cooling systems. We traditionally were into the IC vehicles for air and liquid applications, but with the evolution of new age engines, we are also now diversifying into plastics as well as new applications wherever there is a requirement of a connection. Next, please. So I just wanted to present to you quickly HEN's journey in India. So what led to this decision of we coming to India as well as where we are progressing. Next, please. So how we started is basically in late 21, where we were doing a market study with third party regarding how if there is a possibility for us in India. We were a little late to India because predominantly we were focused on metal connectors, which our assumption was not really suited for Indian market. So we were not really, we were giving it a pass for a long time, but then based on this market study, as well as the intention that globally IC was on the decline, and our thought process was that there is a little more IC development still happening in this part of the world. So we gave it a try. So around 6 months, we did a market study using a third party, and then based on the results outcome, we had a positive feedback that there is OEMs expecting to adopt new technology, even if it is an IC engine. So there are some developments happening. So that's how in the mid 22, we set up a liaison office. The primary intention was to focus only on the metal connectors. We did not come with an idea of setting up something here, starting production or anything like that. So over the next 20 months, what we were trying to do is in a step-by-step manner, we were trying to introduce Hen as a brand, because there was not many people who were knowing what Hen is in this part of the world, and then trying to establish what this product is, what the benefits are, and then go on step by step. So this period was crucial for us because it completely changed our thought process from what the market study said. And I think this is the key for any company coming into India, thinking that it's a one-size-fits-all market where a product is selling in somewhere else in the world, and the same product can be brought into India, and then it works well. So that's a learning for us from this, also for people who are in the webinar. Indian market is very dynamic, and like any market, but here particularly it's a highly dynamic in terms of the quality requirement, the cost requirement, as well as the application. The market conditions are pretty severe. So I think the biggest success factor for any company which is coming to set up here, whether it is an OEM or a component manufacturer, is how quickly you are able to adapt to this requirement. So to our surprise, towards the end of this 20 months, what we realized was, although the market study said there is a big market for metal connectors, but then when we started going into the customers, the OEMs, we realized that there is a gap for plastic components. We got it as a surprise because we already knew that there are some mature players already in the market who have been here for 10-15 years, and then we never realized that there would be any possibility to enter here. But then we got this feedback from OEMs, and then this thought process changed us, because in the late 22s, we already got an opportunity from one of the biggest Indian OEMs. We thought even in a facility here, we were able to convince them what our product offering was, and then they gave us an opportunity. And in a quick turnaround time, we were able to give them support. So that's our biggest success factor. And from there on, we changed our strategy. We said, okay, India's requirement is unique. So what we did is we decided to set up an entity here, and it's just not enough that we set up an entity and then we try to sell some parts which are already available in Austria. So we changed the strategy a little bit. We set up a tech center. There's a lot of skill set, frugal engineering available in India. We took that. We took all the historical experience and support from Austrian engineering centers. We have already made some quick supports, and then we started going to all OEMs in a quick turnaround time. And then that led us to a different path altogether, where we started getting much more businesses from other OEMs. And then the obvious next stop for us was to set up something localized. So that's how our journey progressed. So next slide. So basically, this is where we are today. So like I said, we set up this technical center in Pune. Pune is a region, also as one of the biggest automotive hub in the region, the west of India. So where we have now a couple of engineers. They not only today do the local support, technical support, but they are also now involved in product development support for the rest of the Asia, as well as to an extent now we are also utilizing this as a backup support center for the entire group. So we have a lot of skill set available in terms of creating new models, creating backend support for drawings and all that. So in that sense, this technical support center has been a big backbone for our group now. And then recently we opened our assembly plant in Chennai. So this was a decision that we took, that we decided to have a neutral location. So the idea from here is, if you're setting up a semi or a fully automatic line, in the near future, you might not have that quick of a volume just being consumed in India. So what we decided is, there is a lot of exports, like Anil said, we are moving towards more of an export surplus country. So there was an opportunity for us to do cost-effective parts also produced from here. So we chose a neutral location to support the rest of Asian countries from Chennai. So that becomes as a neutral location to support India as well as other parts of the world which is not being served by China today. So that's the recent development. Next step, please. So this is where we are today in terms of business. So these are all business that we got in the last 4 to 6 months. Once we had that first business from the big OEM, that became a benchmark for us. And then once we were quickly able to adopt towards local engineering as well as local production, and then it followed. This is just last 5 months. In the last 1 month, I think we will be able to add 2 more slides to show you what are the customers and products we added. Next. So for me, I broadly explained to you what the biggest factors were for us to decide to come into India. But I think for us, the biggest success factor why we are already in this growth path is, like I said, the adaptability to Indian automotive landscape. So like I said, our early 20 months was to identify the right fit product. It may not be the product that you thought would be needed, but it was what the customer needed. Although there were mature players, there were some issues that the customers were facing, and then we were able to address it in a quick turnaround time, which is what was our biggest factor. Then second one is, apart from product, is the one thing is unique is the customer, because normally when you come into India and go to OEMs, the first question, although you may be supplying to European and other region customers, the first question they ask you is, who are you already supplying to India? That becomes a benchmark for them. That becomes a confidence for them to bring you in as a next supplier in that particular product. So identifying that first customer who already has an issue and then addressing that customer's pain point becomes the biggest success factor for anybody, as well as especially for us. Once you have that first business, then how you go, like localizing, reducing the dependency on import, at the same time keeping the quality that you have been used to as a brand, then balancing the cost that India requires, and building up a resilient supply chain. You don't need to necessarily localize all of it, but building a resilient supply chain that becomes quick to the customer is the next one. And then you decide on a local manufacturing facility, not just to cater to India, but then you look as a region in whole, and then you see the market potential of the region and the advantages that you have by producing in India in a quick turnaround time. So that's what I mentioned. And then because we have this tech center also now, it's not just enough that you have a tech center, you are able to address to customers. You need to step by step build that capability that they are able to not just support the customers, but also able to support back home in Austria to support you the frugal engineering ways, and the skill set development is also critical. So these are some examples that I've shown here, and the timeline to give you an idea about how quickly this can be. The first part that I've shown is our first development in India for one of the biggest OEM in India, which recently launched 2 electric vehicle models. These are injection molded parts. So I'm not sure if you have heard of injection molded parts being produced in less than 10 weeks. So we were able to do it in 5 weeks. One was because of the design of the product, of the modularity, but also that the supplier base that we have, and then the way in which we are able to quickly turn around things. And then some examples of parts that we have localized. Not necessarily that we have localized all the parts. There are some advantages of still importing parts, like the seals and critical components, where the volumes are much better in Europe. You still can import it, and then whatever is best possible suited for the region, you localize it. Not just products and design, but also the assembly stations. If you look at it, it is not normally mandatory that you bring and import it. You have suppliers today, good automation suppliers, where you are able to use your expertise in design, ask them to develop the assembly station, and like I've shown here, 16 weeks is what we took to develop this assembly station. It's not the usual fully automated assembly line, but it serves the same purpose. It's just a little more additional few seconds for cycle time, but then with the current labor costs in India, I think it's justifiable to have few seconds more. So that's the biggest success factor for HEN in India. Next slide. So from here on, now that we have proved that we are able to do this, our idea is that to build up this expertise. So we have globally a product roadmap now for the globe, but then there are also some gaps specifically for the region. Now we have a technical capability for us to develop on our own. So we are trying to support Europe as well as the region to address this gap. So we are also improving on the product development capabilities, the testing capabilities, also trying to bring up some more innovation. So today we are hearing EVs coming down, EVs going down, sometimes hydrogen. So the innovation would be to bring up fuel agnostic designs where one design would fit all powertrains. Then we have a lot of requirements on sustainability. So we have some good material support suppliers here who are able to give us alternate materials. We are able to test that materials locally. So these are kind of innovations that we are able to support the world from India. And the next obvious step would be to expand it. So now we are shown to the customers that we are able to bring quick turnaround times. We are able to show that commitment to bring investments that are able to meet their capacity requirements. So the next step would be to expand slowly into other segments. And then we are also planning to bring in the group. There are much more products that are available in the group. Now we have benchmarked the connectors, but so we are looking into other products that can come into India the same way we came in. So, next, please. I think that's all for me. Thank you for this opportunity. And at the end of the show, maybe we can take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing HEN's journey in India. I would now like to invite Mr. Pankaj Srivastava, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Quality Austria Central Asia Private Limited. Sir's keynote would be addressed on quality management, certification, and standards across the automotive sector. So please begin with the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Anusha. Really pleased to have all of you here. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Hotnagal. Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Anil, for setting the context very well right in the beginning, and a great example by Sharath in terms of how India is becoming so important in terms of the automotive industry across world. In terms of what we do, we are part of Quality Austria Vienna, and we are looking after Central Asia, including India, which also includes SAARC and ASEAN countries. We've been operational here for last 14, 15 years, and we've had massive success through and through across the automotive supply chain, especially the automotive component industry, by providing quality certifications and compliances which meet not only the ICE kind of formats, but also now the EV as well as in the future hydrogen formats as well. Anusha, if you can go to the next slide. There we go. Next one, please. Excellent. Thank you. This is a very simple thing which I would expect all of you to be very familiar with. On the left, you see when you're traveling for a conference or when you're traveling internationally, you do carry different kinds of adapters, chargers, due to the variation of standards or lack of standards across the world in terms of the way we have our appliances. And you would see there are different type of connectors, and it is such a cumbersome thing many times to have these connectors with you. If you're not carrying one, you will have to run to the reception if you're staying in a hotel and request for one. Most of the international travelers are very familiar, so they always do carry multi-pin adapters. I picked this picture a long time back at a trade show, and I was amazed that the number of connectors which were plugged in of different types clearly mentioned that there's a lack of standardization in this particular industry. And on the right, you will see, and we all have in our wallets and purses, the standard which is ISO IEC 7810, which was made long time back in 1996, which had physical characteristics of identification of cards. These credit cards are exactly same across the world, whether it is Visa, whether it is Master, whether it is issued by your bank, and they operate very well across the world in any of the ATM or any kind of a money dispensing machines. More recent ones are, touch, and therefore you don't have to actually physically touch the machine to have an interaction, but the same chip is encoded. On the right, you see a beautiful example of how easy our lives have been by complying to standards. And this is one thing which has really made international travel business happen, right? So clearly you can see how standards play a very important and a pivotal role in any industry, especially so to globalize it. Next slide, please. There we go. In terms of India, on the left, what you see is a 1942 Morris Oxford, which was brought in. And since last almost n number of years, what you see on the right is possible because India has been using standards, international standards, such as QS 9001, which came then, to currently IATF 16949 for that matter. And now we are now having connected cars. So we are now talking about something like TISAX, which includes cybersecurity for the automotive industry. So clearly you can see how standards have played a very vital role in what Anil was referring in his slides about the 300 billion USD of exports, and that too contributing almost about 12% of that going to Europe. So quality is a very significant denominator of what we have delivered in India. And therefore, I'll talk about how and what we have done so far in India. Next slide, please. So Anil did speak about how big is the Indian market and why would it make sense for you to be here, because today India happens to have the largest three-wheeler market, the largest two-wheeler market. India happens to be the largest passenger car market in the world. We're also the largest tractor market. We're the fifth largest commercial vehicle market and the fifth largest bus and truck segment. And obviously in last about a decade or so, there has been a dramatic shift in terms of the usage of the luxury cars purchase as well. On the right, what you see are specific areas, clusters across India where we have automotive OEMs as well as automotive component manufacturers as clusters. So this is where you, whether it is an ICE or whether it is an EV or whether it is in future and hydrogen is perhaps going to get manufactured until unless some other state comes in, gives some source. Next slide, please. Typically, the automotive ecosystem depends on two areas. One is where you actually start the procurement, you do the manufacturing, and you do the assembly. And then there's a very, very important component of quality control and testing of what has been manufactured. And then comes the distribution and retail. And there will be obviously a large part of aftermarket and end user services as well. Next slide, please. If we look at the current and the future challenges of the automotive and the automotive component industry, including the EV and the hydrogen, these are some of the things which are pivotal. So obviously you look at the quality of the products, the quality of the manufacturers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. And therefore you do a lot of inspection, end of line inspection, product quality inspections. There are specific guidelines on safety requirements. There are standards now on standards related to the automotive safety and cybersecurity safety requirements. We are now having huge pressure on environment and carbon. There is also a very new dimension of connected cars and how cars can be hacked, which puts us into the cybersecurity and the information security. And obviously, you're looking at the business continuity risk across the supply chain, which has got huge number of suppliers across the world. And therefore, as we saw in the Anil's presentation right up front, if there are 12% of exports happening to EU, that means we need to have visibility and transparency of the entire supply chain. And therefore, these challenges are for real. Next slide, please. What you see here is a very complex picture of what I picked up from one of the slides which I found in one of the sessions of Oracle. And what you see here at the bottom, or the bottom center of the slide, is the manufacturing. But what you also see is the part of the sales and market, the product life cycle management, the entire procurement part has become a massive thing. Right on the top, you see how consumers and the distributors are consuming what is being manufactured. On the right, you see the aftermarket, the integration, the human resources, the finance. So what I wanted to understand from what I wanted you people to understand from this slide is that the quality is across the supply chain and not just at the quality of the component. Can you go to the next slide, please? Anisha? Now, if I look at some of the standards which we in India are definitely suggesting, and the companies have got guidance to work on. So we have the IATF 16949, which is mother of most of the standards, and the VDA 6.3, supported by the the 5 core QC tools, including APQP, PPAP, MSA, FMEA, SPC. There are standards on aftermarket, including vehicle damage repair, vehicle component testing. In the connected world, we are talking about information security, business continuity. We're talking about a risk management standard. We're talking about a standard on collaborative relationships. We now have a very clear diktat and a directive from the VDA Association from Europe about complying to TISAX requirements. And then, of course, there's a huge industry in India which is influenced parallelly by the Japanese, which prefer the TPM, TQM, and also from the Europes, which is around the EFQM. Next slide, please. On the safety and the sustainability, you will see there's a definite requirement to comply to environment, energy, water footprint, carbon footprint. Very recently, after the EU CSRD requirements, we now have a CBAM requirement. We also have a GRI reporting or a carbon emission reporting compliance. We also have now ESG reporting, which is getting mandated for many companies, including the OEMs in India, at least start with a checklist-based audits, etc. We also have the ISO 26262, which is the vehicle functional safety for electrical and electronics. We also have 6469. We have 15118. I'm sorry, these are numbers, but there are huge number of compliances which we need to get through, typically from a safety and sustainability, both by the OEM as well as their supply chain. Next slide, please. On the social side, we also have standards like 45001 for occupational health and safety, sustainability report assurance, modern day slavery, and also road traffic safety, where there is an ISO standard. On the supply chain part, there are supply verification audits, chain of custody audits, and of course, a lot of PDI inspections. So there's a whole lot of standards where we have the OEMs and the supply chain to comply with. Next slide, please. So what is the crux of the matter? So the thing is that defects in the automotive manufacturing can have very serious consequences, can put a lot of recall and put a lot of cost of recall, and that could put OEMs into net negative in terms of their business. And therefore, there is a very strict and regulated control on the quality requirements, not just for the OEMs, but also for their supply chain. We at Quality Austria have been helping for the last 2 decades here in India and helping companies, more than over 700 companies, including key suppliers and OEMs like Maruti, Kia, Tata Motors, and maybe all the key suppliers in India, including the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, passenger cars, including companies like Daimler, Force Motors, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So here is a quick overview about who we are and how we are in India. So we've got about 3,200 employees. We've got about 2,100 clients. Out of these, about 600 to 700 are key automotive clients across India. We do have our 26 offices almost everywhere. We are not just into the certification, we are also into the inspection, testing, training, cybersecurity, and sustainability. We have our own lab, which is really helping us to get compliance to most of these standards and specifications. And currently, we are leaders in telecom, automotive, built environment, manufacturing, government, and petrochemical and coal industry. Next slide, please. We look at the assurance. And in India, we have been able to provide the assurance across the supply chain by providing training and capacity building services. We do provide end-of-line inspection, supplier management. We also look at the production process improvement for large companies across the board in terms of their processes. And we also provide safety solutions, not just for the large companies, but even for a very, very small company as well. Next slide. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my opinion and how Quality Austria has been through its journey here in India in terms of various standards and compliances, where the automotive industry has become very regimented, and we need to comply to give the peace of mind to the end person who's going to drive the car. Thank you very much. Over to you, Anusha.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us such a detailed understanding of the management of quality and standards across automotive sector in India. We now move on to the Q&A. We do have a question for Mr. Sharad. Mr. Sharad, the question is, what was the reason for HEN to make tech center and production in two very separate locations?
Yeah, particularly in HEN's case, we wanted to take advantage of two strategic locations. So traditionally, if you look at Pune, it's been a location, it's an automotive hub, traditionally known for highly skilled engineering skill set and quick hiring, and then the Pune being a cosmopolitan city, the speed in which we are able to hire a new skill set required specifically for this engineering was much faster. Whereas when you look at Chennai is much historically known for as an operations hub, manufacturing hub, and also from a logistics point of view, when we are focusing more of supporting also the Asian region, it became a neutral location for us that Chennai is able to serve both Pune as well as the other side of the world from Chennai. And also, we have two different OEM bases, one in the west where it's Pune and other region, and also in south in Chennai and the region. So having two different locations means we are able to be close to both these hubs, both these OEMs. And finally, from a future perspective, if you want to scale up, it gives us an advantage that you are able to scale up independently, whether you want to scale up R&D separately or operations separately.
Thank you so much for answering the question, sir. I would like to invite our Trade Commissioner, Mr. Bhatnagar, to close the webinar. Sir, over to you.
I think we really had an interesting webinar. First of all, I would like to thank our guest speakers, first of all, ACMA, and of course also to our Austrian companies. And I think it was a very interesting mix, Quality Austria operating successfully in the Indian market for almost 2 decades, and also HEN, which just recently entered the market. As said, we're coming to the end of this webinar. I switch now to German. Ich darf Sie noch abschließend über 3 wichtige Events informieren, und zwar im ersten Halbjahr 2025. Der wichtigste Event dieses Jahres beginnt schon am 8. März bis zum 14. März, und zwar eine Wirtschaftsmission zum Thema natürlich Automotive. Diese führt uns in die Städte Chennai, Pune und New Delhi. Diese Wirtschaftsmission wird in Kooperation mit ICS organisiert. ICS ist die Exportservice-Organisation der steirischen Wirtschaft. Diese Delegation wird auch von der Frau Wirtschaftslandesrat Aibinger-Miedl begleitet. Und die Delegation steht unter der Leitung von Wirtschaftskammer-Vizepräsident Wolfgang Heso. Und wir freuen uns schon auf diese Delegation. Und einige von Ihnen werden teilnehmen, und ich freue mich, Sie dann begrüßen zu können. Und dann unmittelbar darauf, vom 19. bis 21. März, haben wir 19 österreichische Unternehmen, die an der India Soft teilnehmen. Die India Soft ist die wichtigste IT-Messe im IT-Bereich, und wir sind sehr stolz, dass wir auch 19 österreichische Firmen haben, die da teilnehmen. Und dann vom 8. bis 16. Mai haben wir die Vienna Up. Vienna Up, das ist die wichtigste Messe im Startup-Bereich, New Tech-Bereich in Österreich, in Wien. Und da hatten wir letztes Jahr schon eine sehr starke ausländische Delegation aus Indien. Wir hatten 35 Teilnehmer mit insgesamt 50 Personen. Und auch dieses Jahr werden wir wieder eine starke indische Präsenz haben. Und wenn Sie Interesse haben, kontaktieren Sie uns, und wir bringen Sie gerne mit dieser Delegation zusammen. Damit beende ich. Ich wünsche Ihnen noch einen schönen Tag. Und falls Sie irgendetwas von Indien benötigen, im automativen Sektor, zögern Sie nicht, uns zu kontaktieren. Und wir stehen Ihnen sehr gerne zur Verfügung, sowohl beim Markteintritt als auch bei der Marktbearbeitung. Danke sehr.